So, welcome to the podcast. Quite a notable figure from the piping scene, if you don't mind me saying. Welcome to Robert Mathieson. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for the invite onto the Big Rab Show.
Indeed. And I have to say, Happy New Year to you as well, because as this goes out, we're now celebrating 2022. It's going to be quite an exciting year, Robert, isn't it?
Well, hopefully a year where we'll hear many live performances.
Aye,
It's been a long
indeed.
time.
Yeah. Oh, we'll get into that, I'm sure, as the rest of the interview goes. But yeah, first of all, I wanted to talk about yourself personally. Now, we all know you as being quite a legendary pipe major and piper in the piping scene for generations. And I want to know how you got your start. What made you lift the instrument in the first place?
Oh, right. Okay. Well, it started off really from primary school, the kind of the last year in primary school, when you come to the end of term
Hmm.
and the teacher allows you to bring in games, or you can, you know, and there was a guy in the class, my friend in the class, who brought in a practice chanter, and I
Oh,
had a go at it, and I thought I would really like to have a go at this, and I went to learn at Polkemmet. Whitrig and
oh,
Polkemmet it
yes.
was called then.
Hmm.
Although I didn't realise it was actually the bagpipes. I thought the practice chanter was the thing that you were going to play. And
Oh,
they actually taught on a different night from the pipe band. So it
mm.
was several months down the road before I even realised it was the bagpipes. I was well into it, and I wasn't even sure if I wanted to play the bagpipes because I quite liked this practice chanter. But anyhow,
Oh,
it was a very long journey in the practice chanter. I was like 18 months to 2 years in practice chanter, so it was slow.
wow. Yeah,
But it
yeah.
was a very, very methodical style of tuition. There was no tunes. You didn't get a tune for about 6 months.
Really? Yeah.
No insight to melody. It was all a technical strategy and learning all the embellishments and all that, which I'm
Mm.
glad of now. But you wouldn't get away with that style of teaching nowadays. But once I got into the pipes, things moved very, very fast. I was slow on the practice chanter, possibly because of the methodology they used to the methodology they used to teach. But I'm thankful for it now.
I see. Because you had that grounding then, really, with all of those fundamentals, by the time you bring them across onto pipes, then it was all smooth sailing, then, really, was it?
Well, I was technically fluent. I
Yeah.
just had to learn about the music and the actual physical presentation of working with the bagpipes, which is a big
Yeah.
hurdle for a lot of people. Some people actually don't overcome that obstacle right through their piping career.
No, that's it. I'm still overcoming it myself in my own piping. I've been learning this past year and a bit now, and making that jump from chanter to pipes, it's a whole different animal, really. Controlling your
Yeah,
blowing and all of
and
that.
you've got the added advantage. You're rhythmical. Sometimes
Yeah.
sometimes beginner pipers are taught all the embellishments,
Mm,
and then they jump onto the pipes and to try and play a bit of a tune, but they weren't actually taught rhythmic fluency.
right.
Body language and how to move and basically how to walk and play becomes a major obstacle.
Yeah.
And I think it's better nowadays, but we weren't good at teaching rhythmic and understanding of rhythm and rhythmic fluency on the practice chanter.
Mm.
You should maybe be told to march when you're playing the practice chanter so you understand, the actual forward motion of the music.
Yeah, yeah, where the steps fall and how the music
Yeah,
flows because of it. Yeah, no, that's interesting. Now, I did think that it was a bit of an advantage, being a drummer for 30 years and then lifting this chanter. God help Andrew Shilliday has had to teach me. He's had to translate everything from piper language into drummer language, but we're getting there.
good. Aye. Keep going. Don't give up. Keep going.
So, can I ask then? Obviously, your time then with Polkemmet bands, you guys, you were in the stratosphere. Around the late '80s. I remember you guys being incredible and being ahead of your time almost for some of your compositions. Was that something that you worked at in your time at Polkemmet? Creating your own voice.
Yeah, I suppose personally, I was always involved in listening to folk music, and I love going to
Mm,
Brittany, and I like Galician music and all that. So personally, I was fairly attuned to a much broader spectrum of traditional music.
yeah.
So when it came to running the band, and at that time I was putting together material for the first solo album as well,
Hmm.
so it kind of overspilled into the band, and I just intuitively, I tried to put some of this music into the band, and we had such a great drum corps. It would be crazy not to incorporate, them into the groove as well. And once Jim Kilpatrick was great at understanding what I was trying to do rhythmically with some of the Breton stuff and some of the more open groove reels and stuff like that, which weren't really getting played in bands at that time. And once we kind of got into the groove with that, it flourished and it actually became a bit of our brand in the early days.
It certainly did, yeah. And if anything, hope you don't mind me saying, but whenever you made the jump then to shots, I think it was 87. I think it was chatting to you before we hit the record button. 87, when you made that jump to shots, you certainly brought your voice with you, and that progressive look towards the music certainly brought that flavor to shots. And is that something that you and Jim worked on a lot to get it put together?
I don't think it was deliberately planned. It just kind of evolved. In 87, I was just recording the Grace Notes album. So I was working a lot with musicians from, would become Capper Cayley, Donald Shaw was there, Jim Sutherland of Easy Club, John Martin of Ossian. We're all working on the album. So I was really getting steeped into the musicality of things at that time. And then stupidly, as pipe major, I took on the band and decided to do the Ballymena concert in the first year. Which, thinking back, that must have been one of the craziest decisions I ever made. But one thing it did do, it meant we launched into a workload straight away, and we had to be ready in 1 year. And we actually, when I went to shows, the first year we'd done the Radical Road concert, off the back of working with these musicians, and we brought them over for the concert. So I suppose that kind of threw shots straight into this musical genre right from the get-go.
Yeah, that's it. And it became the new normal, I suppose, for everyone in the band. Yeah.
Well, not immediately. I mean, there was a bit of resistance in some quarters to hearing it because, like anything, a lot of the stuff we overcooked at times. And like any art form, if you're trying to do something new or something different, you tend to go too far and then come back and harness it a little bit. So there's probably an element of that in it as well, but it was a great musical journey for sure.
Oh, definitely. And one that's been really enjoyable as a fan, for sure, I have to say. Now, you did mention earlier about playing rhythmically, and you did mention about, working along with drum corps and everything. And we all know that Jim is quite a legendary figure in the drumming scene. When you guys, look an ensemble and everything, is that something that you and Jim work together to create?
Yeah, I would say we always wanted to understand what each other was doing. I took a great interest in the music, and I would take a great interest in the rhythmical accompaniment as well, and also I would generally have a rough idea of the groove or the feel of the tune that I felt. And what I always tried to avoid was if I selected a tune and I felt there was a natural rhythmic feel to it, I didn't want to hand it to Jim without letting him know how I felt that tune should be presented rhythmically, so that he had something to work to. Otherwise, he could have come back with something that was brilliant, but maybe in a different approach, which might not have suited the way I was teaching it in the pipes. So yeah, we were aware of that all the time. But by the same token, if I played a tune and I let Jim hear the tune, if he wasn't keen on the tune, I didn't play it. There was no point. No matter how much I liked it, I thought there's no point, because if he's not into this, it's not going to work. And sometimes I hear bands playing modern compositions that are very good, but pipes and drums coming from different directions and maybe not ending up with the result they thought they were going to get. A lot of modern tunes are rhythmically driven and intrinsically have an inherent rhythmical pattern in there, a default position that makes the tune talk. And sometimes when drum corps try to put all their rudimentary stuff in and the pipe corps do the same, you lose that rhythmic message.
Indeed, you lose the voice then. I know exactly what you're talking about. If anything, that's something I wanted to ask you about, because I know, obviously, you've been a judge for a good number of years now in judging ensemble as well as piping. So when it comes to ensemble and having the piping end and drumming end, trying to, create this performance, is there any common mistakes that you've noticed with bands when trying to create a good ensemble performance?
Yeah, I would say the structural pattern of a lot of the traditional element of bagpipe music and pipe band music, you have the melodic theme in the first part, and then you have generally a top hand variation in the second part, and then a more embroidered rhythmic version of the first part becomes the third part, and then you get an echo of the second part in the last part with a resolve at the end. I mean, that's, I'm generalising, but that's basically the structure of many pipe tunes. Now, to make ensemble work, if we're saying that the third part is in the piping, for example, is much more embroidered with the embellishments, more technically difficult, and generally more complicated melodically as well. Very often I hear drum corps mirroring exactly that, playing a simple theme in the first part, a variation in the second part, and then embroidering the theme in the second part and doing exactly the same as the pipe corps are doing it, running parallel in terms of the technical content. And sometimes that can overcrowd the tune as it goes on, and you actually lose the melodic flow and the mood of the tune. And very often, to make the melody and the technical side of the piping come to the fore, the drumming needs to be simplified.
I see. So sometimes less is more, Robert.
So there'll be certain parts of the tunes where you want the drum corps to come to the front, and the rhythm, and it becomes the dominant element. And other times where a very complicated technical part of the melody needs to be heard, so don't overcrowd it with overcomplicated drumming in the same phrase, you know.
Indeed,
and it loses its flow and can sometimes lose the idiom, because people are pronouncing their embellishments so cleanly and trying going for unison that the actual musical idiom dilutes. And I think that is where sometimes drum corps and pipe corps forget that what is happening to the overall message here when I do this with the drumming, or when you do this with the piping. It's slightly, I find it easier to get good ensemble when I played my own compositions, because you could actually customize it for the ensemble.
Oh, I see. Yeah, tweak it in little places to make it sound correct.
Sometimes if Jim done a particular thing during for example, when we're putting a piece of music together, if I heard something that I liked, whether it was a syncopation or a little figure within the rhythm, I would go back and possibly change a bit of the tune to echo that figure in the earlier part, so that it becomes, you're sending the message before it happened, or I'd incorporate that syncopation into the repeat or something like that. You know, so that there's it's more an overall design.
I see. So you can tweak little bits here and there to create call and answers and effects like that. So that's fascinating, honestly. So we do know at the moment, obviously, there's a lot of pipe majors out there that are prepping for the new season. May well be listening to the pod right now thinking, I'm trying to get this medley together, and ensemble is a bit of a nightmare to consider. You know, some pipe majors never think about drumming and how it melds with the tunes. So have you any advice really for pipe majors out there when they have to speak to their drummers? You know, those guys in the back room who are a wee bit smelly and constantly drumming all the time.
Well, the one thing right across the board that I would say in all the grades that is often overlooked is the dynamic range that the drum corps can create within the melody. And when I listen to drum corps practicing, they spend a lot of time on dynamics and deciding. They could spend, I've listened to drum corps spend an hour on a 2-bar phrase discussing the dynamics and getting the message into everybody that this is heavy, this is light, this push through this, sit back on this. But these are all micro dynamics. There's no landscape dynamics. And by landscape dynamics, when I hear an aggressive hornpipe, I expect a strong aggressive rhythmic accompaniment that's sending that aggression or the kind of strong rhythmic message of a march pipe or whatever you want to call it. And then they will go into a tune where it's a strong melody and it's more melancholy or whatever, but I still hear this aggressive drum corps. The mood doesn't change at the drum corps, and the weighting doesn't change. I hear the same kind of powerhouse drumming. So I don't hear a contrast in dynamics from the mood of one tune to the mood of the next tune. I hear them constantly trying to demonstrate how good technically they are in every tune, which doesn't work well. And sometimes that approach strengthens a tune, but a different type of tune, it weakens the message. So you kind of got a evening out. It evens out over the whole medley where you hear this powerhouse drum corps constantly trying to attract your attention by technical precision and powerful dynamics, when the tune's not asking for that. So there's no landscape change between the first tune, the second tune, the third tune. And I hear that in bass sections as well. One of the questions I would always ask our bass drummer in the band is, where do you think the loudest beat in the medley is?
Oh, I see. That's an interesting question, actually. Yeah.
And they would kind of look at me and say, not generally they would say, no, there's loads of heavy beats. Yeah, that's because you give me one big heavy beat, one thump, and then a light, and that's your palette is limited. Whereas I see a point in the medley where there's a peak, and that should be your heaviest beat. And if that is your heaviest beat, you need to leave something so that you can deliver that up there. So I think dynamic range is the big area that is underutilized in every grade.
Oh, certainly. And we do know in your time at Shots, you have had some iconic medley performances that do take you on that journey. And that's really interesting that you mentioned that about the one heavy beat, because I do know in some medleys over the years from you guys, there is that point. And that's fantastic. So good advice there, Robert. Thank you.
There's also an element where, especially when we went through this kind of 20 years of hornpipes and march pipes, kind of with that kind of gallus swing and the four-parted thing, where you're demonstrating great technical ability, powerhouse strumming, and a kind of gallus arrogance about the whole thing. Now, very often you're playing your whole hand in that one tune. You've given everything away. You've nothing else to offer for the next 5 minutes. So subtlety needs to be incorporated, and periods of silence, which is the strongest accent you can create for a drum corps. I would say subtlety and periods of silence need to be incorporated in the first half of the medley so that you've got something else to deliver towards the end. Sometimes I've heard the whole gambit and we're not finished the first tune.
I see. Yeah, it's all within the introduction, really. So it's all about creating that crescendo, isn't it? Yeah. No, that's sound advice there for sure. Yeah. So can I ask then, away from ensemble and all that, I could be talking to you about this, for hours, but I've got a load more questions to get through. So can I ask you then about whenever your time at Shots ended and you had walked away, you then went to Simon Fraser. Is that right? For a few seasons?
I played with Simon Fraser for 3 years, 3 seasons, which was really nice. I had retired as pipe major, and I felt I still had a little bit playing left in me, but I didn't necessarily want to be pipe major. I didn't want, and I wanted the new pipe major to carry on without me breathing down his neck. So it was decided, we tried to find a role for me in it, but it was never going to work. So I bowed out. And then spoke to Terry Lee, and Terry says, "Do you fancy a tune?" And I thought that might be quite nice, because the advantages there were I was playing in a new circuit of contests over in Vancouver, and I decided I would only join the band if I could be a member of the band and attend quite a few contests and gigs. I didn't want to be the fly-in guy just for the Canadian Championship or whatever, and the Worlds and all that. So I done that and thoroughly enjoyed it. And it was more difficult than I thought it was going to be.
Oh, how come?
Because for the first time in my life, I had to learn a different style.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And blend in, which wasn't that over difficult, but I had to focus on it. And also I had to play tunes where the setting was prescribed and I had to stick to it. Whereas after 30 years of me deciding, we'll not have that grace note in the third part, I don't like it. So I had to go along with somebody else's score. So that was a bit of work to deliver on that. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I played at the gigs, and I went over fairly regular. And I didn't really have an appetite at that time to play again Shots week in, week out in another band.
Yeah, aye.
So going to another continent and playing was really ticked all the boxes for me.
It suited perfectly. Yeah, that's it. So can I ask then, also, as well as being involved with Simon Fraser and all of that, you're also involved with the Red Hot Chilies for a period of time. And do you still play with the Chilies every now and again?
I don't now, no.
No?
I think I was going through a midlife crisis, and he asked me if I'd have a tune with him. And I done a few gigs, and then I done a tour of China with them and done a month in China.
Oh wow! How was that?
That was brilliant. I mean, it was gigging every night and really, really good. And I have to say that it was different from playing in a competition, dancing about a stage, and jumping around playing fun tunes to an audience that were clapping and cheering, and not analysing what you're doing. So it was quite good.
I dare say that would be a lot of fun. I find it chatting to the guys that's in the Chili's, they just say it's ridiculously good fun, and you can tell whenever they're on stage that they're enjoying themselves. Absolutely. So there you go. So can I just blame you for something? By the way, I'm going to shake my finger at you right now because you're the guy who's responsible for my newfound love in Breton music. Since I heard the album La Bombe Cost by Shots, that was the first time I'd ever heard a bombard, and I. What the heck is this sound? Where is this coming from? Yeah. I was expecting to hear a Shots album, and then suddenly, whoa, there was all of this. Can you tell me how all of that came about, Robert?
Well, I had been going to Brittany since the early 80s, and I think won the Mcallen Trophy in 1984, and then again in the later 80s. So I was very into Breton and won the Breton music, which was great for me. That's probably one of my biggest moments in piping, actually win Breton music in the Mcallen Trophy.
Yeah.
But I was really into the music. I loved the kind of medieval sound of the bombards, as well, as you say. I got friendly with Erwan Ropar, who was at that time, he's passed away now, but he was the pipe major of the Camp Air Band.
Camp Air Band, yeah.
And I just loved the music. I mean, and I went a few times with Bokema. I went a few times with Shots. I just loved the drama and the dynamics that they produced, that the Bagad produces. And I think we could learn a lot from that when we hear that. They have a greater palette of instruments to work from. I get that, but a lot of the principles can apply to our music as well.
Certainly, yeah. And if anything, in recent years, we've heard a lot of competitive bands bringing Breton style music into their competitive sets. I think that I am all for it. The more of that, the happier I am. Is that how you feel really about, the melding of the two worlds together?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't like to hear a complete Breton medley or anything like that. No. But I think borrowing styles and techniques and melodic lines and tunes from other genres is very healthy. And we're seeing a lot of that. Well, we have done for many, many years. I mean, the accordion and tune list and the pipe tune list has always had a kind of crossover there where we take tunes from each other. And the folk music as well is another area where we can get good music and improve our repertoire. So Brittany is another area, but I would say you have to be careful. You can get so absorbed in the Breton music.
Yeah, you can.
That you understand it more than many of the listeners do.
Right, yes.
And in that sense, it's a bit kind of, it can be a bit self-indulgent because some of the tunes go on and on and on in terms of the big long dances. It's a bit like Pibroch. Sometimes when you hear Pibroch, it's beautiful, but you think in some cases the performer's enjoying it more than the listener. Yes. Unless you're in the zone and you're hearing the whole thing. Breton music can be a bit like that if you overload it. But touches of it, and it's usually minor key stuff, the dark notes that work very well in the Scottish medleys. And the fact that we now have some great Breton Highland bagpipers that come over and compete in Scotland, we're getting good crossover and people picking out elements of each in a tasteful way, which is great.
Oh, definitely. I'm all for it. Yeah. And again, I shake my finger. It's 100% your fault that I'm a fan of Breton music. So there you go. So can I get away from kind of all the tune selection and band talk? I want to actually hear more about the guy, the man behind the legend, if you know what I mean. Can I ask then, what do you eat the morning of a big competition? This is a bit of a random question.
What
did you eat in the morning of the Worlds? Are you a square sausage man? Are you, a bacon roll kind of guy?
I would say but I would prefer to do that at the park. I mean, if it was the day of a big contest, I would rather get there and then I'm ready to eat. Arriving at the venue is the first hurdle that you have to overcome.
Definitely, yeah.
So there's nothing better than arriving at the morning of the Worlds and going and getting that big bacon roll and just wandering around the parks, trying to imagine how it's going to be later in the day.
100%. So we do know, I think it's Reid Maxwell, I think, is famously quoted that he has to have haggis for breakfast in the morning of the Worlds. I don't know why, it's a bit of a superstition with him, but there you go. Yeah, I have to ask then, outside of piping and all of it, have you any interests outside of piping? Do you play golf at all, or
No, I don't. I actually live here on the golf course in Fuerteventura.
I see.
But I don't. I'm not a golfer as such.
Hmm.
Well, if I describe how I would be at golf, it's when you meet that piper who's not very, very good, but they've got the silver mounted David Nile pipes and
All
the
right.
G1 chanter
Oh yeah.
and the kilt center kilt plug and they've got all the gear, and then you hear but they cannot play. I would be that golfer, I'd be the guy that had all the gear but couldn't hit a ball. So the my hobby is art. I paint.
I
Uh,
see.
I
Ah,
originally went to Edinburgh Art School, so as a silversmith, but I've since ceasing being pipe major, I've done a bit more artwork and painting.
I see. Excellent. And if anything, it can be really relaxing for a lot of folks. Yeah, for sure. So
Well,
there you
I,
are.
I actually joined the art club the week
Hmm.
after I gave up the pipe majorship because if you
Wow.
think
Yeah.
that after 30 years of coming home every night from practice,
Hmm.
and you're saying, "Honey, I'm home." You came home that last night and says, "Honey, I'm home forever."
Yeah.
There was a few raised eyebrows in the house at that point. So because you're out several nights a week, for the
Yeah.
last 3 decades. So I went to the art club, and that's what kind of resurrected my painting and that. So
They are fantastic. Well, you did mention a little plug there for the Kilt Center, but I'm going to give it an even better plug. So, for people who don't know, you do run your own business called the Kilt Center. So, we're now looking at the website now. It's just thekiltcenter.com. And you guys cover everything to do with uniforms and kilts and jackets and everything. You want to tell us a bit about the business here?
well, the business was set up so that I could incorporate my hobby into my
I
income
see.
as well.
Yeah.
I originally had a sales job, and I got promotion, and they wanted me to move down south, and I
Mhm.
knew that was never going to work because all my social and musical venues were in Scotland. So I thought,
Yes.
what are we going to do? So I left my job and we set up the Kilt Centre in 1993. It was called the Pipe Box in those days.
Mm.
And one of the things that I quite enjoyed about it was I managed to incorporate my hobby of art and design into the work as well. So I spent a lot of time designing kilts and tartans. We
I
do a lot
see.
of customized kilts for bands and for local
Mm.
authorities. And the biggest successful one would be the saltire kilt with the flag on the back within the pleats,
Oh,
which
yes,
was
I've seen that. Yeah.
which was there. We copyrighted that design, and that's probably
Oh,
our biggest selling kilt
oh,
long term
fantastic.
over the
There you
years.
are.
And now we've done this range that you see just now of tartan tweeds. So I
Mhm.
quite liked that. It was letting me do a bit of art and design and earn some money and stay in the kind of pipe band scene. So that's how the Kilt Centre came about.
There you go. And if anything, I've been on this website now for quite a number of weeks, and I've just been delving through here. There's a serious amount on here. You have a massive collection that I think you can't really do it in one visit. It takes you a while to get through your site. So yeah, there's a wealth of stuff up here. So for folks who aren't aware, then go and check it out, thekiltcenter.com. Yeah, you'll be lost in there for hours. For sure. So, well, obviously, I have to ask you then, with the pandemic and everything, tuition and piping has mostly been brought online because of it. We've all had to go into isolation and lockdowns and stuff. And you've been quite busy then with the Piper's Dojo, doing a lot of tuition and stuff like that. How have you found tuition and piping over lockdown and pandemic, Robert?
Well, it certainly catapulted the whole scene forward in terms of the digital era
Yeah,
because
for sure.
I was also involved in the Balmoral schools and they
That's right.
suddenly had
Yeah.
to go online kind of overnight.
Mm,
Uh, Dojo were very much IT fluent as a product anyway. They
yeah.
were an IT company. Um, but certainly you had to look at it differently. I mean, there are pluses and minuses to the uh, online teaching. The nice
Mm,
thing is when you sign up to Dojo, for example, you can go back into the archives and go over the lesson again
I
and
see.
also
Yeah.
hear yourself. Sometimes when you're teaching somebody, you say something to them and they play it back, and you can sense that they're not quite understanding what you're saying when you're describing how they're playing it versus how you would like them to play it. But when you go back and hear the recording, sometimes the penny drops. You can say, "Oh, I see what I'm doing now." So there's great advantages in that for the online side in terms of teaching. But the biggest thing I find about the lockdown in terms of online is I suddenly seen a change of appreciation between musicians within the pipe band scene online.
Yeah.
Because we were no longer in the competition arena.
Yeah.
So if somebody posted up an excerpt of them playing, you suddenly found other pipers from competitor bands coming on saying, "Hey, that was great, I enjoyed that, you're playing great there." And
That's true. Yeah.
you've seen this more musical style of communication where other musicians will listen to musicians rather than judge them or analyze their playing. And there was a new level of camaraderie that I seen interband, which was really refreshing.
Definitely.
And hats off to people like yourself, the Big Rab Show. Peter Wood's another guy who's got a great online show. That gave us something during the pandemic to hang on to, and say, there's still a bit of pipe and chat going on here. Let's listen into this. And I don't hear them all, but I certainly listen into them. Sometimes I duck in and out during shows if I like the topic, I'll listen in the back. But it's great. You can go back and hear it again, in the archives. It's great to have that facility. I'm a bit disappointed that the Pipe Band Association wasn't really geared up and ready for that, and they really closed down. And I think the biggest lesson from this is the Pipe Band Association need to be IT ready for the next pandemic, if they're ever. They say there'll be more coming. The experts tell us this, so that what should happen, I think, during a pandemic is we should suddenly turn the focus from contests to education, and concerts or whatever, and certification, so that really we should have been handing out certificates willy-nilly over the lockdown period, because we all say, "I'm too busy competing, I've not got time to go and do that course."
See, there you go. Yeah.
And get that ticket to become a judge or become an instructor or SQA or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that's the biggest lesson for the organisations. You say, if this happens again, as a business, we need to be ready. And because the customers are sitting there hungry, they're looking for something.
That's it, indeed, Roberts. Yeah. So we've been doing what we can to try and keep the wheel turning. But as you say, from an HQ RSPBA level, there hasn't really been much in the way of, promoting of the music and trying to push it out there online. So it's up to, the bands and the players themselves to try and do this. So yeah, I think you're quite right. Rolling forward into 2022, we're hoping to see a more tech savvy RSPBA running forward. I hope that's the hope.
I sincerely hope so. I think they're aware of that now. But the danger is that we're so relieved that the season's back, then we just slip back into the default positions, thinking it'll not happen again. I think it's inevitable. There will be other pandemics over the next 10, 20 years, and we just need to be ready for that. For example, all the tuition needs to be in online modules, for example. They need to be pursue that so they're ready for the next time, so that you still feel part of the community. You still feel part of the education system.
Indeed.
And hopefully some form of competition, online competition. I know it's been talked about for pipe bands, but it's never really been done successfully. Because when you see some of the videos that some of the pipe bands have produced during the lockdown, they're fantastic. Not
Amazing.
just musically fantastic, they're visually fantastic as well. And there's no reason why we cannot incorporate that into the final product of adjudication and say, hey, credit where credit's due. That tells a story visually and musically.
Indeed, yeah. No, that does definitely add another element to it. As you're watching it as a fan, you're like, wow, there's drone footage and stuff, and there's flyovers, and it looks amazing. Yeah, for sure. So, I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see what the future brings for this incoming year. But I wanted to bring it back to yourself and ask some more questions about you. And I'm going to blow your head up here, okay? I'm going to really stroke your ego, but I'm going to say that you are quite an inspirational figure in the piping scene, if you don't mind me saying. One of the most successful pipe majors in all of piping history. And can I ask you then, a lot of people would look to you for inspiration for their own playing, think, oh God, I want to play like Robert Mathieson. But who do you look to for inspiration with your own playing?
I would say you categorise historical piping figures and outside piping as well in different ways. I mean, there are pipers and drummers who are great competitors,
Yeah.
and there are pipers and drummers who are great musicians,
Yes.
and there are pipers and drummers who are great technicians.
I see. Yeah.
So I would analyse people and look to people for different reasons. You know, musically, I would look at some of the great bands over the years I consider to be great musically. The 78th Fraser Highlanders probably one that was a very strong influence on me when Bill Livingstone had them.
Yes.
Isaac and Donald in the 70s were very, very musically powerful as well. And go back further than that, the Red Hackle Pipe Band was a very musical band under Johnny Weatherson. Technically, the Muirheads were fantastic in terms of the piping idiom and execution was brilliant. Strathclyde Police execution and actually Clodagh style. Their piping style was very, very cloned, quite compressed, probably over compressed. If you were playing on your own, you wouldn't compress as much as that, but it gave that unison effect, which was very distinct and had a great tone. So I looked at all these benchmarks of different people. Musically, I would look out with the piping scene to see if there's something I can collect. When I hear a tune being played and it's very emotive or very strong in terms of how it's delivered to the listener, and I try and analyse why is that strong. It's not just because the guy's a great player, it's not just because the guy's a great tone, it's emotionally strong.
Yes.
And try and identify what that is and try and put that into your own playing.
I see. Oh, that's incredible. Yeah.
So that, because there's, especially nowadays, I think it's actually even more important nowadays. In my day, there wasn't an abundance of great technical players.
I see.
And so good tone and great technicians, that was almost enough to get you in the prize list.
I see.
But now I would say technicians are 10 a penny. Every youngster you meet can play fantastic. Tones become much more accessible, by the new gadgetry that's available, the consistency of bags, the reeds. G1's a company, for example, that's producing a chanter now, which sets up itself nearly.
Indeed.
So you don't need to be gifted to deliver a good tone, and the teaching system now will get you there in terms of the technical presentation. The one element that I think I would ask people to strive for is to listen to how, for example, somebody like Davy Spillane plays a slow air on the Uilleann pipes.
Yes.
And listen to him. Listen to him milk the money notes on it and how he folds it and delivers the tone in a more poetic way, leans on it, and you hear the overtones. That kind of thing, which you cannot teach. That's something you feel when you play the pipes and something you deliver when you sing the song or the tune. So that element is nowadays, I think, is that the element that will separate you from that other great player or the line of great players that are about to come on and play after you.
Yes, it's the emotion of it, Robert, putting that across. Yeah.
And it's the performance factor.
Yeah, indeed.
And I think that's one of the difficult things about adjudication now. It's no longer good enough to do an audit style adjudication where you tick off every part as it's completed and every torluth and every swish rough and the clarity or evenness of the rolls and all that. And once you've ticked it, it's very much an audit style of adjudication. The standard of players now actually demand more than that because they're all pretty good. You're splitting hairs when you're judging on a technical comparison, and you're splitting hairs when you're judging on a tonal comparison often as well. So the music is where you really have a task in deciding, is this music talking to me?
Indeed, that's it, and it's on the music, exactly, Robert. Yeah, when you're talking about that top level, for sure. So can I ask them, obviously you've been in that top flight level for years and years. Can I ask them, throughout all of your storied career in the piping scene, has there been one moment that stands out to you as being your most memorable moment?
Wow,
that's a difficult question. That
I think if you win the Grade 1 Worlds, that the first time That has to be a unique feeling and sense of relief,
yeah, yeah.
because it's such a demanding journey that takes years of planning and getting it wrong and back to the drawing board and trying again and improving and then raising the actual personal time commitment from every player in the band.
Indeed. Yeah.
And as the person in charge of the band, you're, trying to motivate them to put all this time in, for one or two people to come along and say yes or no, in terms of who's going to win.
I know. Yeah.
So, and then if they don't do it, it's very difficult. So the first time that you win the Worlds, it certainly stays with you because there's a relief valve that goes at that point, and you think,
it's just
and about 2 minutes after that, you realise there's only one direction you can go now.
Oh God, that's depressing. Yeah.
So that is one of the big highlights. One of the other highlights would have been I took on the North Lanarkshire Schools project and ended up taking them onto the park at one of the majors in Inverness, and the kids won. And
brilliant.
If you've ever seen an adult so excited at winning an office, so that was a big highlight as well. But there are many. But I would say I remember the musical things more than the just the prizes. I don't remember being second or third to anything, or not getting a prize. And there were many times.
Yeah.
The community, the pipe band, and the friends that you make through it are there forever, through the good times and the bad times. So
indeed, yeah.
I wouldn't change anything.
No, for sure. So I don't know. That's quite an incredible answer. Thank you. So can I ask then? There's a question that we ask every single guest that comes on. Doesn't matter who they are. So can I ask you, Robert Mathieson, what is your favourite cheese?
Well, it has to be Manchego goat's cheese. I'm in Forteventura. There are more goats on the island than there are people, and the goat's cheese from here is fantastic.
Oh, wow. I've never heard of that. There you go. I'll have to look that up then, actually. There you go. That's an interesting answer. I didn't expect that. So, well, before we let you go, I have to say a massive thank you for taking time to chat to us here on the Big Rab Show podcast. It's an absolute honor to have you on the show because I am a huge fan, and I hope to have you back on a future episode with a bit of luck.
So brilliant. Thanks very much for having me on the show, and congratulate you on the show and how it's taken us through
the lockdown.
You. And I'm interested to see where it goes to the next level, because now the online shows, piping and drumming, are here to stay for sure, and I look forward to it.
That's it indeed. So with that in mind, then, returning for 2022, ourselves in the Big Rab Show have tons of plans. We're going to try and cover everything that we possibly can. Can I ask them, what does the future hold for yourself then for this incoming year?
Well, I'm involved in the training of adjudicators a little bit. We're trying to revamp that and hopefully take it online. If I can get the support from the association to do that. I'm looking forward just to hearing some live performances again.
100%. Yeah.
And I think it'll be interesting to see how quickly we get back to standard again. And a lot of people, I hear them saying, it'll take a good few months, 3 months to get the band ready to where it was. I don't believe that for a minute. There are so many great players out there. Yeah. I think it will take 24 hours for the top bands to get back where they were.
Yeah, and just hit the ground running. Yeah.
The danger is they overcook it, and get too excited, is getting them ready and build them up gradually. I mean, because the people we've got in charge of these bands now can get a tone very quickly. The actual default position of each individual's instrument is far higher than it's ever been. They carry a repertoire historically anyway, so it's just a matter of adding in a few new tunes and go back there and pressing the button, and the new normal is here.
Doing the business, indeed. I can't wait. Well, before we go then, we finalize everything for this week's episode. You have been famously quoted in a previous interview that you did for the Piper's Persuasion, and I'm going to quote it back to you just to see if you still believe that. And it's very cryptic, but what you'd said is that success is when preparedness meets opportunity, and you were talking about being prepared, and that's how you get success. So is that something that you still believe in, and being prepared and practiced?
Oh, absolutely. Preparation Luck, I says, good luck is when preparation meets opportunity.
There you go.
You
Yeah.
don't get good luck if there's no preparation.
No, exactly. So I dare say there'll be a lot of folks listening to this right now who are busy in their practice and everything, waiting to get back onto the grass. So we hope that this week's episodes give you some encouragement. Keep up the great work, folks. Have working out there, and yeah, we can't wait to see you all back on the grass. Yeah. So, Robert, thank you so much for being on the show this week. Like I said, it's been an honor, and we hope to chat to you in a future show if you'll come back.
Sure will. All the best.
Indeed. Thank you, Robert. Thank you.